Okay, so why build a base? So it gives your kids something to stand on, so they're not just just sitting by themselves, and it looks much better in photos. Also, it gives you bonus points in most competitions. So like our competition here, if you build a base for it and it's not sloppy or anything like that, we'll actually give you bonus points because we have that third category for it. Also, it'll give you more opportunities to tell a story. You'll see an example of that a little bit later on, but you could have pieces of debris on there that will tell like, oh, this mech just destroyed this other mech and stuff like that. Okay, so what do you need? You need foundations for a base, some kind of bulky material, and we'll go through what each one is. It needs some texture materials, paints, and then what I like to call detail. It's mostly like grass, trees, stuff like that. Sometimes rocks. So foundations. Usually it's a piece of wood. That's the easiest thing. They sell those, like those pieces of wood right there, they go for like $1 or $2 at most craft stores. And also insulation foam that they sell, you can get it at Home Depot. I don't know what the current price for it is, but before inflation hit, it was like about $5 for a big 3-foot square. So yeah, I don't know how much it costs right now. I haven't been to one in a while, but one sheet usually lasts you a long time. Like I bought one sheet years ago and I'm still using it. And that's like scraps from it too, so I'm giving that away at the end of the panel as well. Okay, so and also if you guys have any Daisos nearby, they also started carrying like different wood products as well. They're usually just boxes to carry stuff, but if you flip it over, you can use it as a base as well. Okay, so bulking materials. This includes stuff like plaster sheets, paper, and stuff that's called a Sculptamold. So what Sculptamold is basically plaster that has paper fibers in it. So when you mix it up, it's actually a lot thicker than plaster, and it looks like cottage cheese, but you can like smooth it out later on. And plaster is just mix it with water, then after a while it hardens up. And plaster sheets are just sheets, usually just cheesecloth with plaster built into it. So you could put that over, sheets of paper that eventually, once it dries out, it'll harden up. So this would be texture materials. This includes something like texture paint that Tamiya makes. AK makes it as well. You can find, if you go to a hobby store, you can find it anywhere. Corkboard, they're usually sold in tiles. If you ever have a package and it has that packing foam in it, save that. You can save a little bit of it and use that as a base for your bases as well, and also rock molds. So I actually have some plaster rocks that I made with the rock molds. Basically, they're from Woodland Scenics. You can find them at any hobby store. Even on Amazon, they're like $10. Buy one and you can keep using it forever. Okay, so you also need some type of sealer. My favorite would be Mod Podge. So it's kind of like PVA glue, which would be your typical school glue. It does have a little bit of resin in it, so it does have a little bit of water resistance once it fully cures. And you want to do that because a lot of the materials you use aren't the best to paint on, and this gives it a better surface for the paint to stick. It also prevents water from leaking back into the base as well. So paints, you just go to any craft store, pick up these paints that are like $1 each. You don't need anything fancy at all. This is, you can find them at Walmart, Michael's, like Hobby Lobby, and they'll last you a long time. I've had those for years as well. Okay, so turf and dirt. So this would be stuff like grass blocking, static grass. You can even use real dirt if you go outside. That's real dirt. It's like, what's gonna look more realistic than that? Also, they sell stuff that looks like dirt, but that's like $10. You can just go outside and get like real dirt anyway. Okay, so we're just gonna go through a couple of like super easy bases. They look like they're hard, but they're pretty easy. So we'll start off with this that I made for a Necron flare. And you could, this not exactly gunpla, but you can apply this to a gunpla base. So this is just basically a round piece of wood, and I just broke up a piece of cork and just glued it onto there and just cut the edges. Oh, and by the way, if anyone has any questions during the panel, just raise your hand and I'll get to you. So I have the cork there, then I also broke up smaller pieces of the cork to act as the rocks. Yes?
Why does everything you make have to have blood?
I don't know. You're asking the wrong person. Okay, so yeah, I also use other pieces of cork, which all you have to do is just break off. Once you have a piece, you can start breaking off the edge of it, and it looks just like rock. So just get that, glue that down, and then I sealed it with Mod Podge. The thing about Mod Podge is that it is transparent, so it's better to mix in some paint so that you know what areas you covered. Like in this instance, I wasn't too smart to mix brown into it, even though the cork is brown. But you can see it's a little bit shinier. That's how you can tell that it's sealed. And then I just went over that with some Tamiya texture paint. So this would be, I think I forgot which one exactly, but it's dirt. And for the rocks, all you have to do is dry brush. So go over it with like a gray, and then just hit it over with like lighter shades of gray with a dry brush. So all you do is take a brush and try to get as much paint off of it as you can. And from there, just lightly go across the rocks and you'll bring out all the details back. And there you go. That's, oh, and also I used some grass tufts that you can buy at most hobby stores. They're just pieces of the grass that you can peel off a sheet and then just glue down to the base. Okay, so this one, this kit I built a long time ago, and I had it on one of the original action bases. That's actually my first custom, if I remember right. So what I did here, I should have zoomed in on it, but oh well. So this is super simple. It's just a piece of wood, and I glued down some of the plaster rocks onto it, and I repurposed some of the little figures. Oh, this would be a better view here. So I just painted everything gray and then just hit everything with a dry brush afterwards. Just a lighter gray and working to a white to get like a highlight to it. And I just added some little figures I had laying around to kind of help with the scale. And if we go back here, it's a little bit hard to see, but if you have the kit ready and done and you build the base after, you could wrap that up in you can wrap the feet up in some like plastic wrap. That way you could kind of sink it into the basing material. So this is the texture paint. That way it looks like it doesn't look like it's just sitting on top of it. It looks like it's actually, something heavy that's pressing down on the ground there.
Ready?
Yes.
You're also your tentacle guy. You're talking about what to do with the feet. Are you also a feet guy too?
No.
I think something's afoot here.
Go home. Just go home. Yeah, so you can see that here a little bit better where it looks like it's moving some of the dirt, some of the ground away from it. So it gives it a sense of like weight to it. Okay, so moving on, this is a Pikachu I made for last year's SCGMC. So I just grabbed a bunch of the pieces of cork and just kept breaking it up until it looked more like a rock. And then just to kind of help blend it into the piece of wood there, I just added some glue and threw down some sand to give it a little bit of texture. And then you can see I just went over it, just painted everything brown, and then just started going over everything with like a dry brush of lighter shades. Just like you can see on the rocks there. I don't know how easy it is, but you can see like the edges are a little bit highlight, so it doesn't look like it's all the same color. And then just went over it with like a different color of like a moss deposit effect to it. And then I had to make it gross and stuff, so I added some more little worms I made out of epoxy putty. And if you want to use that type of gross thing, it's actually called Nurgle's Rot. If you buy it, it's from Citadel. A lot of the Warhammer people use it. And that's the final thing. So really just a couple pieces of cork and paint, what it comes down to. Okay, so you can also use this to scale up if you had a bigger kit. I don't know if Brandon's in the crowd right now, but Brandon has a YouTube channel called BHOT Builds.
Oh my god, BHOT Builds?
Yeah, BHOT Builds.
He's amazing.
So all he did for this base is cut up a piece of foam, give it some texture, and then cover it all in texture paint. And that's it. And he actually has a video of it, of him doing it step by step. So if you go to that YouTube channel, you can check it out. I think it's the last video he uploaded. So you can have a great looking base with just a piece of foam and paint, and that's it. Okay, so moving on to slightly harder bases. So starting with a lava base I made for that kit. So really all it is just a bunch of plaster rocks just glued onto a piece of wood. I would not recommend using a thin piece of wood here because you'll see a little bit later on it ended up getting warped from all the water in the plaster. But yeah, once you glue them down, you can just sand off the sides just to make it a little bit square, and then what it did was just fill it up with plaster so the rest of the area is. And something easy you can do just to seal it off. It also works with resin. If you're doing a resin pour, is just use painter's tape and just put it along the edges of the base there. Especially with plasters, it's not going to bleed through anything. Even with resin, and if you're careful enough, it won't actually mess anything up. So all you do is take the painter's tape and just put it around the edges, and then you can pour whatever you're going to. In that case, it's plaster. What?
Nice lasagna. Is that in the microwave?
Yeah, that's the microwave, yes.
So, how many times do you have to redo something when it doesn't come out the first time?
No comment. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this was a lava base. So what I went is it looks a little bit brighter in the photos, but I went through with a red area that would a red paint that would make it, in the darker areas, it's not going to be as bright yellow or orange. And then in the recesses that's closer to the lava, that's when you do the orange. And then there's this paint, it's called crackle paint. Not sure you can really get it in most hobby stores. I got mine from, having a blank on the company name. Green Stuff World, there you go, Green Stuff World. And they make texture paint, which all it does is once it dries, it starts cracking up. And you can see it there a little bit, where it starts doing little cracks in the area there. Just to give it that broken up lava, fresh lava effect. And then I had to go back in and paint the areas that are supposed to be a bright color with white. In this case, it's white ink, because also I want to get that glow effect on the edges. But I messed up and covered a lot of the areas. If you look back, a lot of the areas that are supposed to be lava, I accidentally painted the wrong color with the texture paint. Just went over, erased it, it never happened. And then what I like to do after I'm done with the base is there's a paint. You don't have to use this paint, but this is called Black 2.0. It's from Stuart Semple, I think. It's a really cool paint. It basically makes everything matte. If you look at the photo there, that black barely shows up. You barely see anything there. And it gives it that cool effect. So, don't be afraid to improve your skills. This was my first attempt at making something that looks like lava, and the latest attempt. And which one looks better? Right? So this was my second attempt, and after learning a lot more, like you can go on YouTube and there's just tons of videos, tons of resources you can use to improve your skills. Okay, so on to this one. Okay, so this was for a Hello Kitty custom I made. Started off with just a piece of the cork and also that thin piece of wood. Actually, doesn't show up as much there, but this one definitely warped on the bottom. So I don't recommend using like thin pieces of wood. I'd recommend using the thicker ones. But yeah, just same idea. Get some pieces of cork, put them down. I used a little bit of clay to kind of fill in the gaps in between, so it doesn't look like it's just stepped. So it looks like it transitions a little bit. And then you could also use oven baked clay. Like I made this design here. So I believe this is called Sculpey clay. You can buy it in little packs that are like $2-3. Basically, it's an oven baked clay. You put it on there. You want to make sure you don't have anything that's still wet on the base when you go to bake it. But it's super easy to get this texture. You just lay it out, then you can go outside and grab a rock and just roll it over, and it'll pick up the same texture. So once it's baked, and this is that part where I was talking about, you can have it tell a story a little bit more. So you can see here, I had pieces left over of the Hello Kitty. I don't know if you guys have built it. It comes with like an actual little Hello Kitty kit. So what I did, I just took some of the pieces from it and added some blood effects to it, and there you go. This little Hello Kitty killed the other one. So and you can buy different blood effects. Like Green Stuff World has their own blood effects. I like using this stuff called Perma Blood from Pale Knight Productions, I think what it's called. Yes.
How many times have you had kitchen fire?
Kitchen fire?
Yeah.
None. Why? So oven baked clay, it bakes at a very low temperature at like 270 degrees. Most things like wood and stuff aren't going to burn at all. They burn at a much higher temperature. So yeah, and then this is why they started calling me the tentacle guy. So this type of base, for this pose, you really have to plan ahead. So you want to make sure you have a good idea of what the final pose is going to be for the kit, and then start from there. So I laid it all out and did the same thing we did before, where I taped off the edges and poured plaster. This is just a straight plaster pour. And then I went in and just, while it was still wet, I just dug some of it out and made it like a little pool in the middle. And also added a couple of little barrels. And that's more of another way that you can tell a better story. Like you'll see later on what those barrels are for. So yeah, so there's a little area down there at the bottom that I dug out that I'm gonna turn into like a little pool of like nuclear waste type of thing. So I start mocking it up and start painting the area. For the pool area, since it's going to be a little bit more recessed, you want to paint it a little bit darker, since whatever resin you have isn't really going to darken it that much like it would in real life. So that's when you want to go in with like the darker browns and put it under there. And then, or you can just be like me and mess it all up and cover it in different type of paints anyway. So that had no effect at all on what I did there. So it just made it look more like mud and like something was coming out of it. And yeah, there's what I was talking about with creating a story with your base. So right here, there's some radioactive waste that got into the ground and created radioactive worms that killed this poor bear guy. It also glows in the dark. So for resin, I know a lot of people get intimidated by having like resin water. You really don't have to. It's really easy actually. So you can buy the resin at different hobby stores. It's like it's kind of expensive now, but it used to be like 20 bucks. Now it's closer to 30. It's a 2-part resin. So you mix 2 different liquids, and then what they do is they cure to like rock hard. It's like a rock hard material and that's more transparent at the end. So this is the initial pour. I added some glow-in-the-dark pigments to it as well. And I forgot to put a final photo. Cool. Yeah, you can kind of tell there. So once you start pouring it, after you mix it, there's a lot of bubbles that come into it. What you want to do is go back over, get like a lighter, and any sort of heat, like a heat gun. I wouldn't recommend using a hairdryer because it blows air too much. You can go through with a lighter, a torch, and just pop all the bubbles real quick, just passing it over. And then you can end up with something super clear. Okay, so onto the little bit bigger bases that are more like dioramas. So you can kind of tell over on the right-hand side, I was kind of mocking it up on the first slide. And here, all I used was foam to start building up the base. Don't mind the weird shape of the wood under it. That's all I had available at the time. I don't recommend really using stuff like that has like multiple corners. It doesn't look all that great. Yeah, slowly I start mocking it off. I start cutting off pieces of it. And you always want to like draw on the base just to get a good idea of where you want everything to go. So this looks ugly now. So every base that you make is always going to go through an ugly phase where you have no idea if it's going to turn out good or not. Just keep going. Don't be afraid. Just it's going to look like it's not going to. I can't say bad words. Forgot there's kids. Yeah, just don't be afraid. Just keep going. Like this, I just started gluing little plaster rocks all over it, and slowly started covering it in plaster. Eventually, it doesn't look as bad anymore. And then that's when you start going in and start painting it, and yeah, just go over different browns, highlight the different areas. And eventually you get to a point where you want to start doing a resin pour. So same step here, just when you're doing it, just make sure that the tape is really against the piece of wood. Don't be afraid to go through and sand the piece of wood first to make sure that there's no gaps that it can get through. And then once you pour it, I believe this is after I already went through and popped the bubbles with the torch. So just got to make sure that you don't put something under it so it doesn't mess up whatever you have it on in case it does leak. You never know, but if you're diligent with putting tape on the base where the resin is, then you don't have to worry about it. And there was the final result there. Okay. So next, I guess this really was a diorama. I made the mistake of doing everything with cork. This would have been a lot better to use foam with. I believe this was like my first diorama. Yes?
So when you use baking clay, going back to the other slide, and you put it in the oven, is it safe to cook it after? And should you clean it after?
Just clean it after, you'll be fine.
I heard it adds flavor.
If you're paranoid about like baking stuff in your oven that's not food, just clean it after, you'll be fine. Okay, so yeah, I built up the backdrop of it with cork. This is really something that I should have used foam for because it ended up being really heavy. And same steps, just wish I had more work in progress photos of this. But yeah, you just glue pieces of plaster rock to it. Whenever you're gluing plaster onto something that's dry, you want to make sure you wet the plaster a little bit so that the glue absorbs back into it. And then you just cover it in plaster, smooth everything out, put your kit back on there to make sure everything looks okay. and then you start painting. So notice how I didn't seal this plaster with Mod Podge. Plaster is very absorbent, so there's a method for painting rocks called leopard spotting. So what you do is take watered down paint, and you have different colors. Ideally, you want to pick 3 colors, like I did brown, gray, and I think a reddish brown. So you just go through and just what it's called, leopard spotting. Just go through with a brush and just start spotting the rocks everywhere, so it's not all the same color. And there you see the second color, and then once you go over it with a very light wash of black or a different color, it starts tying everything together. So this looks a lot more realistic, and it's a lot different than just dry brushing the rocks. There you go. And this was a second black wash over just to tie it a little bit more. And then you start painting it brown. Again, this is one of those steps where it looks really bad. But for this one, I went through and added grass and stuff to it, so didn't really have to worry too much about it. So, slowly start painting with more brown so that it gets a little bit darker. And then it starts looking really bad. And at this point, I think I was panicking a little bit, thinking, I messed the whole thing up, I have to repaint it. But, once you put the grass on it, it's fine. So this is called, it's from Woodland Scenics as well, it's called a grass flocking. Just put down a layer of glue and then just sprinkle the stuff over it. I have some included in here. So yeah, it's like ground down foam. I don't know how well you can see it. All you do is put glue down and sprinkle it over. You might want to do a couple of layers. And then after a while, it starts looking like real grass. Well, at that scale. And don't be afraid to go in and use like different shades of green, different shades of brown, because they also make a brown flocking. And suddenly, it doesn't look as bad as it did before, right? So a couple more shots of that there. Put the kits back on them. If you're going to integrate the kit into the base like this, like right here, there's pieces laid out everywhere. You don't want to have it painted first because you don't want to have plaster or glue or whatever you're using for the base to get onto the final painted kit, because that's bad. Then you have to repaint the kit. So you want to do this before you paint it. And this has some electronics, but you kind of get the idea where I start adding different trees. They make thicker versions of that flocking that looks good for bushes. And there was the final product there. Okay, so this was, you'll actually be able to see that out there. That's that tentacle mushroom I made. This is the base for it. So what I did here is start off with a round piece of wood. I didn't want there to have an edge on this one, so I wanted it to go all the way down to the base of it. So I just took a Dremel with a wire brush and started chipping at the ends of it. Not the best idea. It took a really long time, especially if you have a lower power Dremel. So then I start adding, pieces of chunks of foam for the edges. So I wanted to have a little bit of a rock face, and then a little bit of. Didn't initially want to have to do a resin pour because I was working on this base maybe 4 or 5 days before this was due. This was for the Cerulean project. I don't know if you're online on Instagram, you might have seen it. But so you just grab some pieces of rock, plaster rocks, and just start gluing them onto the edges. You can cut the foam to have, to kind of fit it in, and then eventually you'll have a better idea of what you want to do. So at the next step, I decided, let's. I didn't want it to be completely flat. I wanted it to have a rolling hill effect type of thing. So I start marking off the areas with a marker of where's the raised land and where's the water going. And this would have been perfect if I had like a piece of foam for the base instead of wood, because that took like 3 hours to kind of dig everything out. So it could have saved a ton of time if I just used foam. Yes?
What was the inspiration? And did your girlfriend hate it?
Yes. You'll see after what she means, but it's called tryptophobia. Don't look it up if you're afraid of holes. Yeah, Steph knows what's up. Maybe.
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I used different pieces of foam to have the raised area, and then it's kind of hard to tell here, but I filled everything with. This is what I use, the Sculptamold. So it's basically a really thick plaster, and it's really hard to see in this photo, and I apologize, but I just kind of smoothed everything out to have like a rolling hill effect to it. So it's a little bit easier to see here. So this I did end up sealing with Mod Podge, a mix of Mod Podge and black paint, just so I can tell what's what. And then I start off, whenever you're building a base, painting the rocks is probably the first thing you want to do. So that's what I did here. I started painting the gray, and just slowly started going over it with different colors of like gray, different shades of gray, and then ended up going with a wash of black just to fill in all the recesses. Yes? If someone was paying attention earlier, Chris, it's the cheap craft store paints, $1 for like a little tube of it. So then I moved on to the rest of the area. I realized that the initial paint I used wasn't that great, so I went in with different colors. And so this is static grass. This is my first time using static grass. Basically, you have a machine that sprinkles little blades of grass on there and makes them stand up with static. The one I use really sucks, so I'm not going to recommend it. It's like a cheap $25 one on Amazon. So some of the grass didn't really stand up. It's like all over the place, which is fine because it looks like normal grass, but just wasn't the effect that I was going for. So then added the tree. I sprinkled a little bit of the flocking I was showing earlier just to have a little bit more texture so it doesn't all look like grass. And then what you want to do is glue everything down. I forgot to mention this in the other one, but you can use something like scenic cement, which is basically just watered down glue, a little bit of alcohol, and Mod Podge. So for this one, all I did was sprinkle on top of it with a dropper. I didn't want to bother spraying the entire thing down because this had to be done within the next day or two, so I was kind of speeding through it. And yeah, there's the resin pour that I was talking about in the beginning. So once that initial resin pour is done, Mod Podge also makes a gloss version of it, which you can just brush onto the top of it and then go through with like either a straw and just blow little ripples into it, or use an airbrush, and that really, gives it, doesn't look like static water. It looks like there's little ripples everywhere. And there's a little bit of a close-up with the monster on it, and it hides most of the stuff I did to it, but oh well. All right, and thank you for watching. You can find me on my social media. Freddie was wrong. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. I didn't pick the name. Okay, so I do have a couple of little starter terrain things for you to, if you wanted to build a base. Yes?
Are you ever ready?
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys want to come up here, we have some over here. Also pieces of foam. Please try to stick one per person just so everyone has a chance to get something.
Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
I wanted to actually make this.
Yeah, it's super easy. Oh, and then all the panels from today will go up on our YouTube channel soonish.